Thank you. And just hit 4. All right, so let's call the meeting to order at 4 o'clock. Let the record reflect that Councilmember Jackson is absent. He is excused. May I have a motion for the June 5th minutes?
I move the June 5th, 2025 minutes as presented.
Proper motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Doesn't appear that we have any public comment at this time, but if anyone comes in, we'll happily invite them to the table to speak. So we can move forward with our agenda. Discussion B, council appointed internal auditor, job posting, section I, the scope of work. In our last meeting discussion, we talked a little bit through about the job descriptions for the internal auditor and what that would all entail. We were provided some examples previously, and we asked if Ms. O'Leary could provide a synopsis of that scope of work, including language, hybrid option that speaks to the shift of not having the same supervisor annually, and developed a little bit more language and with consideration of council rules, along with confirming the experience, salary, education is comparable with other internal auditor postings. With that, are there any thoughts from the committee first after reviewing some of the documentation and the language that was provided? Thank you, Ms. O'Leary, for the matrix of the internal auditor in both positions, I should say, and the language there, the comparison reports across the board. Anything that stood out that we want to continue to move forward with? Or is everyone okay with the essential job functions that was provided? Looks like there was a condensed, I know last discussion, there was quite a bit. And I know Councilman Jackson had mentioned not being too broad, but making sure it's tailored to the functions that we needed for the internal auditor. I think also in communication, spoke a little bit more about the hybrid piece, which was helpful. It also spoke a little bit more about what that remote work agreement, and we can talk through that too, as far as what that would sound like within the personnel rules as well. So I'm gonna open it up for that discussion.
I think, sorry.
Yes, Councilman.
Thank you. I think that the attachment A, scope of work, it does speak to a lot of the expectations that the previous standing committee internal audit had discussed in the past, what those expectations were, the type of work that an internal auditor would be expected to perform. I also think about our experience with our most recent internal auditor. I guess an additional expectation I would have, it not necessarily listed here that I could see, but our previous auditor laid out a fairly detailed timeline of how those audits would be performed throughout a calendar year. And so I thought that that was very helpful at that point in time. And that is also, I think that would also be helpful to understand as a new auditor comes in and their scope of work and how that particular auditor would plan to schedule out the standard audits that we do need to, look forward to receiving on a regular basis. So that's what I would add to that scope of work in the attachment, is the expectation that we would have a detailed out timeline of when this work would be expected to be conducted.
No.
Okay. I do agree, because from our previous municipal meetings, the previous auditor had a framework per se, so it coincided with even our budget presentations or whatnot, so that things wouldn't overlap gave ample time to do their due diligence, receive some of that information from the reports and be able to cascade it out to the committee before it gets brought to the committee of a whole or to council. So if we are just to add maybe the template, I know that that is in a couple packets, so maybe we can just infuse that language that was already developed. Why recreate the wheel if it worked for time frame wise? So we wouldn't be hitting against deadlines. We can add that bullet point within the job description or in the description about the timeliness or whatnot, just so that the new internal auditor can kind of have like a bullet point or an outline.
We could style it as creates a yearly audit plan.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yes, I think that was the verbiage, yes.
That is, yes, what I was getting to as well. If I may,
Yes.
Something like that, I think the verbiage is correct, but to provide an example within the posting, I'm not sure about that piece. I do think that it would be a friendly exercise during the interview process. If we were to offer information, and this is something that I've been a part of in other types of interviews, when individuals apply for a job and they are selected for an interview, then typically they would have a response via email. Please come prepared to present. And in this case, we could say an audit timeline or that framework, something much like what Ms. O'Leary just suggested. And then we can see what they have to offer. Maybe it's a brief list of the types of audits we would expect to see. And, if they could develop something like that. And then during the interview process, they would have the opportunity to present something like that. And of course, that would all need finessing. I'm just kind of throwing ideas out here, but I think that could be helpful in the interview process.
I'm not opposed to adding that bullet point of creating a yearly plan, audit plan framework. And then as we do the interview process, give a little bit more context behind it. So I'm not opposed to that. That was the scope of work in a sense, is just making sure that the language was there, having those comparables, which it does seem pretty close within the other demographics. And then I know we were talked briefly about the educational piece. It looks like it's still a consensus that keeping it at a bachelor's degree is suffice. After that's additional to the scope of work, it was the posting. So where that would be posted, the location. I think Councilwoman Kelly Bonnegal, you have brought up where and how often those postings would be for the position, or it might have been Councilman Jackson.
That may have been Councilman Jackson's question. If I could just comment on the educational piece for a moment. I do like that. I know previously I had brought up the last bullet point, if not already a CPA, CIA, CFE, and so on, that certification must be obtained within 1 year of employment or as a condition of continued employment. And I had wondered, how do you obtain up to 5 years of experience without having those credentials already? I'm not pushing back on having that language in there. The bullet point above that these types of certifications is preferred. I agree with that. I did attend an informational webinar last week that centered around not only auditors for municipalities, but at the county level, at the state level, and learned some information there and understood that some other jurisdictions don't require their internal auditor to be a certified CPA. Just something I'm throwing out there for context. But I do think we would want a credentialed professional internal auditor here with the city of Lansing. So not pushing back on that. I just wanted to offer those comments on the credentials.
No, I appreciate
Mhm.
that.
And as far as where it's posted, I think 30 days is more than fair. I have a question for HR. When postings go live and you determine that they will be up for 30 days, is there ever a time where you lengthen that timeline or scale back? Let's say, and it's just an example, let's say it's live for 20 days and we have, 55 applicants, and so is there ever a time where you try to adjust that timeline, or how do you work that?
We definitely have extended them. So that's no problem at all. I think I would caution a little bit at closing them early because, people review these things. A lot of times they have things going on and they think, okay, this is the due date on this. I'm going to apply in this time frame.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's a per se like huge issue with that, but I would just caution against it as the best practice. for
Okay.
future.
Yep, I think 30 days is fair, is a fair timeline.
Okay, but the 30 days, so we have the posting is good, the 30 days is good for that. The language, we're almost there, because I feel like we need to jump down to skip over and go to discussion item D, because that also entailed the conversation of the hybrid piece for the internal auditor and the second position. So because we're talking about the internal auditor, we can also incorporate that language that we had discussed from previous meetings. I'm sorry, Councilman Cost, did you have your hand up?
Yes. Just under physical capacity requirements, I think the sentence "good vision required to read" is just supposed to be required. I think we missed a D. It's on page 2 of the job advertisement.
Yeah, there should be a D there.
And I would be in agreement with Councilmember Pelivanoglou about that fourth bullet point kind of seems unnecessary, given the fact that we're asking for 5 years of experience. If they have 5 years of experience, they have one of those things. And perhaps the bullet point could say that they need to continue certification in some way. Continue to be certified.
Mhm.
I like that because I do believe there is a continuing education component for their certification, so that makes sense.
Maybe it should just read, instead of "if not already," just maintain. Yep, and certification, just leave it at that. Certification, strike out the rest except for as a condition of continued employment. If that makes sense.
Yes.
So maintain CPA, CIA, CFE, and/or CISA certification as a condition of continued employment.
Councilwoman Pelivanoglou.
And now that, thank you, now that Councilman Cost had pointed out the good vision requirement, I'm just curious, is this often in job postings and does that bring up any ADA issues? I know that in general, sure, an auditor would be expected to read documents, ascertain the meaning, but there is equipment that's widely available and accommodations that can be made. So is that type of sentence typically included in our postings?
It is, but we always use the language if you require a reasonable accommodation, we will go through the interactive process to see if we can grant that reasonable accommodation. So that's always available and that would entail an interactive process.
Thank you for that. Oh, and I do see that on the last page. Thank you for that.
And maybe the last part of that too, I have a question on. Some night meetings required. I think that probably should just read night meetings required, because there will be night meetings no matter
Mhm.
what. especially during budget.
So Larry, you're good with those edits? You're, okay.
Thank you.
You. So if we could just jump down to a little bit of that discussion for D for the council staff personnel rule amendment, because this would impact the internal auditor's role. In our previous discussions, we spoke a little bit about, we asked OCA if that was a feasible option with the hybrid. Thank you, Greg, for sharing the insight on that piece. Councilman Kosky also asked about the no non-compete clause, and that was shared as well. So it was best to move forward with we could move forward with the hybrid option. But one piece that I do like, because we won't put the non-compete in there, is one of the bullet points is stated that evaluations and amendments can be reviewed on a 6-month basis. So we can keep it at 6 months just to kind of get a pulse check for the position, or we can make it more frequently. Feel like we can tailor it if we want to do 60, 30, 60, 90 day, or however see fit. But I think that's a nice way to kind of get a pulse check on how the process is going, if there is still, if there's any conversation regarding maybe seeking other opportunities. Those are conversations that could be had during that time. Outside of for the personnel amendment, the other piece that I know I asked before, but it has a lot of language that speaks about the remote work agreement. And I believe last time we didn't have anything like that in play. So would we have to now have a remote work agreement drafted? Or if we go hybrid, because that language is in this quite a bit.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was under the impression that some employees already within the city do have a remote work agreement. So I thought there was some standard agreement that could be used for these positions as well.
Right. And I thought I asked if there was an actual agreement. I thought that you had mentioned that there wasn't, but I may have misunderstood.
We have language in our CBA that speaks to a flexible work schedule. So I sent over some proposed language that you could possibly use or may want to use in your posting. In the, I think it's Teamsters Local 243, it says the department head or designee may determine set hours for their department to be staffed. This determination shall be made in consultation with the employees within the department. Following the determination, employees may select flexible work hours or a combination of in-person and remote hours, so long as the department is sufficiently staffed. Flexible and/or hybrid schedules will be assessed every 90 days or as needed, and the city may terminate hybrid work schedules at any time if necessary to meet the department needs. That's the language we currently have in 2 of our CBAs right now.
So okay. So then that answers my question then, because I thought may have misunderstood on the last meeting when I inquired about that agreement. So that answers my question. Like one of them. I'll open it up to the floor though, first. Questions on, yes, Councilman Cost.
Craig, I don't have the rules in front of me. Is the work agreement one of city council rules? Is this something we're gonna have to change in our rules?
It's a good question. Council rules are silent on the question of remote work. One possibility would be putting flexible, like language regarding flexible schedule, similar to what city has with some of its bargaining units in the CBAs, or so putting that into council rules. You could potentially it would have to be council approved by the body, but have an agreement that says, here's how this is going to work. And I think you could have that be sort of as an addendum to the rest of their the rules that they are working under.
Yeah, that was just kind of my question, was if these are city rules or if we can just do this the normal resolution way.
And the only thing that Elizabeth knows probably more of the specific nuts and bolts of this, but when you're talking about having a remote work agreement, just understand if everybody's signing off on that, depending on the language that's in there, that's going to be something that you all as the manager might not necessarily have control to walk back for some period of time. So depending, it's going to be very specific on how you word it, how you phrase it. If it's a, hey, this is this thing that could happen, or this is this thing you get to do. Just, I don't know, be aware.
But the agreement itself, within the agreement itself, I mean, you do have the ability to say, this arrangement isn't working with this
Sure,
specific
correct.
employee.
You just have to
And
write.
therefore,
Yes.
because leadership has determined
Yes.
that this is not working very well, we're going to walk back this agreement with this employee. And so, and I'll just say it in plain language. If this is something we pilot for, let's say, 6 months and it causes confusion or our leadership determines that it isn't working out very well. Essentially, they could engage with each employee and explain why this is not working well and then scale back on the remote work agreements
Absolutely. I've just
individually.
make it clear, at some point an individualized assessment will be made and communicate. I mean, language exists to tackle this problem. Just make sure that language is clearly in that agreement that says here's what the city, or here's what the council expects if you're going to be working remotely. If these aren't met, then we'll have a discussion, or however you choose to do it. That can be done. Just make sure it's explicit. Here are the criteria that we're going to use. This is how we're going to do this.
That's in the, because we can expound on that underneath the cancellation piece. I'm wondering, I know, well, right here, it just says that it can be canceled in any time within writing, within 2 weeks' notice. But could it fall underneath?
I think you guys might have something that I don't have, which is probably what's causing me what my problems are. Oh, yeah, I'm not looking at this. Okay. I'm sorry. Please proceed.
I think even in the modification piece, I mean, as long as they're written agreements between council and employee.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't realize you had a draft that you were looking at right now. I'm looking at these documents over here, and I'm sorry. So I will.
Councilman Fox, you had a
Yeah, so, and Greg, you don't have it in front of you, but there might be some confliction here because you've got cancellation where it says council together does it and modification council together does it. But under work rule 1, the council president and an employee will determine that. And then it goes on to say, council president, vice president must review schedule, approve, modify, or deny. So
Yeah, I circled that too.
it becomes just traditionally, and I guess that's another question because I don't have the rules in front of me. Does it state that the president is the one that manages personnel in the rules? I don't remember.
Yes,
Page 4.
right, the council president, unless it's delegated to the vice president under the council rules, is in charge of sort of the daily doing of the job by the person. So that would, like the council president can't say to the internal auditor, for example, now you're going to go buy me food, because that's very much outside of their job description. But the council president, unless delegated to, unless it's delegated to the council vice president, is in charge of making sure, like stopping by and saying, are you finishing this project that you need to be working on? Or I see that you weren't here at this time, what's going on? That kind of stuff. So the day-to-day functioning of the person, that responsibility falls to the council president. Yes. So I would think that, hours that are being worked and stuff like that would fall to council president and then vice president get delegated unless that's specifically changed.
So would
That needs to be changed.
would the wording be better if it just said leadership? Or it should see president or designate
Well, I mean,
And
you,
or.
you could say, hold on, I'm pulling up the language right now, but you could just reference back to the personnel rules, consistent with personnel rules.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, there was,
Unless you want to change that.
And then I guess the question then comes into cancellation and modification. Should that also say consistent with? Because now you're delegating it to all of council.
And I think, well, and I think that's a conversation that has to be had here. It's, the delegation is in the personnel rules to the council president. Ordinarily, without the personnel rules saying, without the council having passed the personnel rules, you approve the personnel rules by resolution. Without the council having done that, delegating that sort of duty to the council president, ordinarily, all of that would come to the council every single time. And so if the council wanted to say, like, how the remote work is done is something that the whole council wants to vote on, you can, the body can do that.
But when you're coming into the agreement to change the work arrangement, I guess would be more my question.
Yeah, I mean, that would create a conflict with the way the personnel rules are currently written. Right. So either you would need to change this or modify or add, I mean, it might be worth adding into the personnel rules generally, just a reference to there may be a disagreement for remote work,
so adding the remote work into,
referencing the possibility for this. Yeah. I'm sorry if that creates.
No, I think it's still, because I mean, technically then the president, in 6 months, when there's a different president, they could say, I'm going to deny all of the remote work, which would circumvent these two items.
Correct. And so if it's the desire to not have that possibility, I would say it would make sense to say, have that document be something that's approved by the council and then modify the personnel rules just to say there may be a remote work agreement approved by the council, which would govern remote work. And then regardless of what the personnel rules say, well, no, the personnel rules would now point to this as a thing that exists. And you could do it for any of the council employees.
No, yeah, and I get that. Maybe I'm missing it because, I mean, the reference is 0.1. So technically how this is written, let's say we roll this out in August, I could say, okay, no one's getting remote work. I'm going to deny everyone. I'm totally skipping over cancellation and modification by council, but I think at the same time, I mean, it's a double-edged sword is the question that I'm asking. Because it also, I think, would make it difficult for anybody in leadership to manage. If we're going to a full vote on personnel issues on day to day. I mean, as chair leaders, you know how many emails there are daily. And then there's, constant, as president, constant communication with personnel issues, whether it's time off, it's this, it's that, it's the other thing, time cards. So I think it just becomes a bit, this whole thing is a little confusing.
doesn't seem consistent across the document, because if that was areas that I had questions about, as well as the language, there's council president, there's vice president, there's council, and then there's supervisor. So there's multiple pieces where it doesn't focus on the who.
And this
And-
is
and with-
Supervisor Sherry
Right.
to
So
Renee. I mean,
we want to make it less muddy
Sorry, you were
for
there.
the employee. So who do they go to at what particular point? Because currently, when I was going through it, there was a lot of moving pieces. And personally, I would be confused of who I need to go to for scheduling, or say, I want to modify my hybrid schedule. Okay, do I go to council as a whole, or do I just go to council president? Or, so, yeah.
because
Or
you could do
whoever my
either according to
supervisor
this,
is,
yeah.
right. It's very ambiguous, so it doesn't really drill down.
I guess, what do the other ones say?
With unless somebody has a specific objection to this, I'm looking at this now, I see the way that it's working. I'm happy to find each of those instances, and I'm happy to, at least provide you the optionality of whichever direction you want to go. Want it this way, it should all look like this, and if you want it this way, it should all look like this. But I'm happy to look through this and send back notes on that. And I guess to the committee, do you know how you want it to be? It seems, and I see that, because this is a proper amendment. These are not just remote work rule. This is, or a remote work agreement. This is the amendment to the personnel rules. So yeah, you just need to be consistent. And I don't know, it makes sense if it goes to the president. Because the way I read this, in most of the instances where the vice president is also involved, the president will work with the person, because that's the way the rest of the personnel rules are written. But in terms of actual approval, it's almost like the president and the vice president have to agree. So you've got another person on the hook for decision-making after a plan is figured out. But that can be modified however you want. So I guess,
I would be fine to see it either way.
Yeah, me too.
where you've got a,
I just have question, I guess, for committee members. And it was just briefly mentioned, and it could be that one of them misspoke. I think the word designee was brought up, like, president or designee. I would, my 2 cents, veer away from the word designee. Is there a world where President Koss names Councilwoman Pelly Vonnegut designee and I'm not in leadership? How would that work in the future? And so I just think it's very important to be clear that we use the words leadership and or president and vice president when we're talking about who has the authorities to work with the employees and sign off on agreements and then scale back those agreements.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to having seen it both ways. To Councilman Koss's point, I do like keeping it cleaner and avoiding like even the supervisor language, the designee language, and just do one or the other, whether it's leadership or council president.
Yeah, consistently. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
yeah, and just for my purposes, I would pull out leadership in any instance and just refer to president and vice president, because leadership is not otherwise defined in your rules or in
No.
your charter or anything
I
else.
see.
So that's,
And I would almost say that the cancellation modification should just say president and vice president, not council, because that would make it consistent.
Yeah. And then just so there's, in the fourth point, there's also the word language of supervisor. So if equipment failure or power outage occurs, it speaks to the employee having to report within 60 minutes unless the supervisor authorizes otherwise. So like just those little
I think-
wordsmiths.
I think that's probably borrowed from some other
Yeah.
language.
And I think that I almost, as you look at this whole cancellation modification grievance could be struck, because I think under the work schedules, it does define most of those points already. Where it talks about approve, modify, or deny. But I agree with Council Member Carter on the who is supervisor.
Yeah. And I'll say, with extremely limited exception, the charter tells us.
Yeah.
Everyone's supervisor is going to be. So if you had internal audit staff, their supervisor per charter is the internal auditor. The internal auditor supervisor is the council. So I would almost just get rid of that.
And
We're a little
for,
late in the game for that.
Got to a place where I can make bullets now.
there we go. And then for the first bullet point on page 1, under 2, it already speaks there about the implementation of special arrangements, the hybrid, remote, flexible working. It already states that it has to be in writing and approved by council president and vice president. So to Councilman Cos's point, if it already speaks there, could we just omit the cancellation modifications or even add a piece that if there needs to be changes, it still has to be in modification, or it has to be an adequate timing and writing, because it's like kind of dual efforts over here.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Pellegrini.
Yeah, thank you. The only variance to that is maybe just combining the cancellation and making it cancellation / modification and rolling all of that language into maybe 1 or 2 sentences. And that's covered, and we're ensuring that it's very clear that it may be canceled or modified. And in my opinion, if I'm reading through this document, it could be easy to gloss over that if I'm an applicant. But if it's its own section and it's in bold and it has a title, I'm more apt to understand, okay, this is offered, but it may be canceled or modified.
And I would just add that, you know, being a remote worker myself, for the state, I think that this part of it is we're probably never going to have to cross that bridge. I think most people, you know, when they do remote, if they choose to remote, there's not necessarily an issue that arises where it comes up. I think the only thing I didn't see in here that I would, and maybe I missed it, would be something, so for me, in my remote work agreement, if my supervisor calls me because they need me in the office for something, I need to be able to come in to address the issue. And there could be instances where that happens. I don't, rare and infrequent, but they could.
I said that.
I might have missed it.
I thought I had seen that in here too. But I do agree with Councilman Cost. I also have a hybrid schedule with the state of Michigan, and the language is something to the effect of if the work and if the work of the department dictates that you report to the office, you must report to the office. And that covers a variety of instances, whether it's meetings, a special meeting, whatever.
Oh, it's right here, number
It
8.
may be.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yep, there.
All right, that was 25 megabits per second. I hope no one's speed is that slow in the city.
Any other comments on this document? Yes.
We are going to get edits back from Greg on the next meeting.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
I do have a comment, and of course, this is up to leadership, but as we're sort of venturing into this territory that I don't believe we've dealt with in the past, I have come from offices that do offer remote or hybrid options, but because we serve the public and our office does need to be available to the public, just some food for thought that as you engage with employees, current employees, future employees, maybe just ensuring that we do have, I guess, what we described as office coverage. You know, as you work with schedules, you know, coming up with something that makes sense for all, but also ensuring that we do have a presence here in the office.
And I think that's actually a valid point because we also answer our own calls. So we don't use 311. So someone does need to be here to answer the phones. But I'm sure that we can work with, I mean, we have such, you know, such a small staff, we can probably work with folks and say, okay, you both can't have Fridays off. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Or, you know,
reasonable.
here-
So, you know,
Yeah. Here's a stick, you guys fight for it.
Yeah, I'm not remote worker, so I don't have as much expertise, but as a person who did a lot of scheduling with various staff members, that was one of the main things. we wanted to make sure that anyone that's coming on, or anyone coming in, because we worked with the public, has sufficient go-to people.
Yep,
and
to talk to.
Order and talk to, and direction or what
I
have
mean,
you.
incoming mail, things like.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
We should rotate some council members to answer the phone. They're calling for us anyways.
They are.
Forward them.
The other piece, and we don't have to have a conversation on this now, but just some food for thought to think about it. As we are looking to fulfill 2 positions, are we looking to do this as an immediate action once those positions are filled? Or are we going to just start at the beginning of the fiscal year of 2026? So just to think when this will go into effect. So just having some thought through that, because we have processes that have to go through with the job, like
Yeah.
the applications and the interviewing and so forth, and we're already halfway through the year. So,
So
Mhm.
sorry, maybe I misheard you. You're referring to calendar year?
calendar year, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Because we're definitely going to miss fiscal year
right.
with this. So
Mhm.
I think that makes more sense to me,
And
just because, we don't know how long this document's going to take, but we're going to probably be pushing out,
yes,
hiring documents
Mhm.
for these positions. Because next fiscal year starts in just a few days.
2 days, right? Yeah. So yeah, calendar year. And then, it'll be a great opportunity because then potentially new faces as well. So.
On the application, I noticed on Detroit's, they had a non-discrimination clause in there. Do we put that on? I didn't see it. Maybe I missed it. Yeah.
I don't
don't
know.
know.
Specific in the application, but
There
it's
should
all
be
over.
That
everything.
standard on NeoGov.
Oh, you know what? That's in their telework that they actually put that. So I guess then the question becomes on the telework agreement, do we need a statement of non-discrimination as well?
I would say no, because at that point you've already hired the person.
Okay. Well, there could be a world where
I'm not,
we don't live in the perfect world, and there could be a leader who doesn't like somebody based on a characteristic
impermissible.
and discriminate, and there's nothing in the, I could see that happening, and then you find an attorney that would agree. Would it hurt to add those to the end of it?
HR perspective, I don't mind if you put it anywhere. I will put it everywhere.
Oh, well, there we have it.
Still won't discriminate.
Adding that clause. That would be great. Right. Kind of skipped around, so we'll go back to discussion C. So that's the council legislative analysis job posting. So with that, we received job update functions were drafted for the role, the salaries, thank you for providing the various salaries, background experience, educational needs, and so forth. So open to the discussion of, are we good with the bullet points that was provided in the packet? And also the compensation, are we good with the position title? Are we good? I know that was a conversation too with the name. Do we want to keep it as legislative analysis?
This looks pretty cut and dry state of Michigan wording, I think. Especially other tasks assigned.
I will offer that I do like, under education experience, 2 to 5 years of experience. I think about, people who are newer to the workforce, and oftentimes people are stuck in this limbo. How can I gain experience if you're requiring 5 years of experience? So I think between 2 to 5 years is fair. And I have read through, the summary of duties, training, knowledge, abilities, requirements, and the bullet points on the back page. And I agree with this. And like Councilman Cost said, it very closely mirrors something that we would see within the state of Michigan
Mhm.
requirements and specifications. And I don't take exception with anything that's listed in this description.
A lot of us merged together, so that was good. Councilman Costa.
The only thing I would say, and I'm not, maybe this is a question for HR, the bachelor degree requirement. I feel like we could say bachelor degree, but I think there should be an option for, or,
Like how it is for the city of Grand Rapids, how it says bachelor's degree and the experience, and then it says or any equivalent combination
correct.
of training, education.
Because I think that okay, I mean, I'm just gonna put myself out there. I have a high school diploma. I did not go to college. I'm not college educated and we're making legislation. I think that someone could be capable of the tasks that are listed here without necessarily having that college degree.
Just right above that bachelor's degree requirement, we have our equivalency language that would encompass.
Oh, there it is.
Could we place that as a bullet point as opposed to
This.
being next to the title, just to make it clear that there is an equivalency option?
Because I think that's how most state jobs are posted nowadays anyways. When you look at it as, or you've been a level 9 for X amount of years.
Any equivalent combination.
I like that.
And what, the other piece, the name, I know that was, we threw that around a little bit. Is that where everyone for good on the legislative analysis?
No issue with the name.
All right.
Yes, I had no issue either. Just to throw it out there, I wonder if the line that reads bachelor's degree or equivalent, how this committee feels about changing that to associate's degree. Or starting there as a base. I mean, if,
And we still have
I
the
mean,
reserves the right.
yeah, I mean, we have, LCC offers paralegal studies and all different, criminal justice, associate's degrees and so on. And so I think we could, to Councilman Cost's point, for many, many years, I also did not have a degree. I returned as an adult student. And I think it is important to offer these opportunities to people who have a wealth of experience and knowledge and have worked really hard and could be deserving of a position like this. But I would be willing to drop that baseline from bachelor's to an associate's degree if this committee finds that acceptable.
I'm not opposed to it. It brings a little bit more inclusivity as well. We don't know what people's circumstances, so
I don't disagree.
I'm okay with getting that good. So Larry, is that a good noted?
Great.
Perfect. Any other questions on discussion C item or the legislative analysis? We're good with that. Once we get those modifications, we're good on that. So outside of that, we already talked about the personnel rule amendment. Any other items to discuss before we set the next meeting?
Not other, but just the general notion that the sooner that we can wrap up these details, the sooner we can have these positions posted. And I know we're all eager to do that, so.
Yes.
Within the next meeting, we'll have the cleaned up version for the legislative analysis, the options for the internal auditor or the personnel rules. So we should be able to solidify that in the next meeting, hopefully move forward after that.
She's looking at you, Greg.
So we were doing every two weeks or what? I think that will put us at July 17th. That is the next 4.
2 weeks is the 10th, but you could do the 17th because,
Doing 3 weeks. Mistake.
so, yeah, you were doing 3 weeks.
17th would be fine for me.
17th.
That's fine for me.
What time? Because there is a potentially city operations
Oh,
meet that Thursday.
So we did the chamber last.
Yeah, we did have a
Yeah.
duel, yeah. So do
I'm
that
okay with
if there was.
Yeah, that's fine.
if
Four.
needed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay,
And the Chamber of Secrets,
I'm good with that.
Harry Potter reference.
it'll come if there's any referrals to city operations, but if not, then you can still have it in here.
Okay.
wait,
Perfect.
I've seen,
Anything else before we adjourn? All
I
right,
have nothing further. No.
all right, we're adjourned at 4:50. Thank you.
Even if it's in the Harry Potter movies, really.
You haven't seen Harry Potter?